Welcome back. Now, tonight, imagine your mom, your dad, or perhaps your best friend, brother, sister, in pain, in misery, suffering from a terminal illness, for sure going to die, and wanted to die. Imagine they begged you to help them do it. Could you? Would you? Well, what would that be like? I'm not talking about someone taking someone off life support or stopping tube feeding. I'm talking about actively supporting them in killing themselves. Tonight, a California woman stands charged with helping her 86-year-old friend commit suicide. Police say Elizabeth Barrett helped Jack Cowinsey ingest a fatal combination of prescription medication. He was not terminally ill, but had reportedly suffered from PTSD and depression. So if you had to decide between watching your loved one die or be miserable, what would you do? Joining me tonight, former prosecutor and author of And Justice for Some, Wendy Murphy. The lawyer for Elizabeth Barrett, David Borsari, Jennifer Popik, and legislative counsel for the National Right to Life Committee, and John West, who actually assisted both his parents in suicide. John, I want to start with you. Tell us that. I mean, again, I have four guests. I've got to work through everybody's stories here, but yours to me is the most sort of dramatic. What made you decide to do this, and what was that experience like?
Well, my parents were terminally ill and in pain, and they asked for my help. And I provided it. It's sort of common sense. The people you love and you care about, you do for your loved ones what you can.
Had you discussed this before it got to this point? Is this something you had shared together and planned, or just when things got bad, they asked for help?
Well, they asked for help when the time came around. Prior to that, it was just kind of a philosophical issue that was discussed. It was a medical household. Both my parents were doctors. And so it was just kind of a social thing of a patient's choice at the end of life. And individual choice is something our family believed in.
Do you find something that I find very frequently is that physicians, when faced with terminal illness, choose suicide? Because we see what happens to people that don't do that. It's very common for doctors to do that.
Absolutely. And doctors know which side of the white coat they want to stay on. And nobody wants to be a medical basket case at the end of their life, particularly medical people. And a lot of doctors have their own stashes, and a lot of doctors help their patients. It happens all the time.
The district attorney says that Barrett chose to assist this man, switching back to the case and ending his life instead of seeking help for him. Take a look at this.
And what she did is the opposite of what we expect decent people to do. We expect decent people, when they see somebody like that, to pick up the phone, call 911, and say, hey, I know this individual, and he wants to harm himself, he wants to kill himself, he wants to end his life, he needs help. She did the exact opposite. She helped him. And that's a crime. He was part of the greatest generation. He fought in World War II, and unfortunately he came back and he suffered from depression. He suffered from a post-traumatic stress disorder. He was paranoid.
John, one thing I've found for sure is that physicians, when faced with end-of-life terminal illness, and they know, because we've seen it in our patients, the suffering that's ahead, commonly choose suicide.
Oh, absolutely. Nobody wants to be a basket case at the end of their life, especially doctors.
Well, it's funny you say basket case. I want to go on out to Jennifer Popik, the National Right to Life. Jennifer, I believe you had some data, or quoting some data, on the reasons that people choose suicide, that it's not necessarily pain and misery.
That's right. In the 2 states in the nation where they have actively legalized physician-assisted death, physician-assisted suicide, what we see is that there had been survey data done, and they talked to family members, close family members, and sometimes the patient themselves. And overwhelmingly, the patients selected as a reason that they were feared becoming a burden. And from our point of view, this doesn't become a choice anymore. These are people, and they have fears, and the fear is that they're going to become a burden, and it's not an active choice. And the idea that they're in current pain, not even one person selected that. Sure, there was fear of future pain, and there was other things, but not one person in this survey data selected being in current pain as a reason for choosing, so-called choosing assisted suicide.
But, John, I would say that misery is the #1 reason, and misery is not necessarily recorded as pain, is it?
Exactly. Misery is how you feel about everything, and there's a difference between being depressed and being appropriately sad that your life is going to end. Other thing I'd like to point out is there's actually 4 states where assisted suicide is legal, not 2. 2 legislatively and 2 judicially, but it's 4 states. And there's lots of data which show that people who are in pain, especially in Oregon and Washington, where it's been around longer, are choosing this. And as far as being a burden and all that other sort of thing, That is a form of pain, what my mother called psychic pain, if
Misery.
you will.
Misery.
Misery.
It's
I like
misery.
your term.
David, I want to go to you. Now, you're representing Elizabeth Jane Barrett, the woman that did this.
Yes.
To me, it looked like an accident. I don't want to, be the judge and jury here, but this woman goes in and helps her friend who's on a lot of medicine. The guy dies. She gets blamed for this guy's death. Am I reading this right?
You're reading it right. The one thing everyone seems to agree on is that the victim committed suicide. The issue in the case is whether Elizabeth Barrett knowingly assisted him. I'm here to tell you that she did not.
What about the doctor who prescribed all the medicine? Where is that in this?
That may become an issue, or he may have unilaterally decided to abuse his prescription. But what Elizabeth Barrett was told by the victim was that, please help me take some medication that's been prescribed by a doctor.
So this story isn't even about assisted suicide.
Right.
This isn't a man and a woman who colluded together to have a suicide, and she was actively assisting him.
That's correct. She did not knowingly assist him.
You sure of that?
We're certain.
And there's video of her, I guess, preparing stuff, and that was. And why did he have a video running?
He had surveillance videos in his apartment for whatever security reasons he needed, and I'm led to believe that the crushing up of the medication was captured on video. She trusted a friend, and he asked to help give medication that she was told was prescribed by a doctor.
Wendy, I want to go out to you. Does that defense withstand the sniff test for you?
Well, if that were the whole story, but she also took him to a funeral parlor before this happened to make arrangements for his burial. That will bear on what the jury thinks about her intentions.
Well, but he was an
86-year-old
man. I mean, just making preparations, perhaps. I'm just playing devil's advocate,
look,
but...
I know, but I'm just saying it's not that weak of a case. There is some evidence that she was intentionally and knowingly doing what she did. Let the jury figure it out. I worry that assisted suicide makes murder murky, and we don't want murder to be murky. We want to preserve the value of life. There's just so much about who makes the decision that makes me nervous. I don't want money-driven decisions about who lives and dies, and that's where we're going. I want to introduce a new segment to this show. I hope you don't mind. I'd like to know, what would Drew do? Because I'm hearing everybody say what they think. What would Drew do?
Jennifer, here's what I would do. Honestly, really, I think what you're asking is, what would I do if I weren't a physician? And I no doubt would do the same thing that other families do, is sit there and be completely miserable while I watch my loved ones suffer day after day after day. And I would sit and shake and rock and feel helpless. And as physicians, we're helpless to help those family members because we can only go so far. We wouldn't do this to our dogs, I say, and yet we do this to the people we love. So I have a real problem with this stuff. We need to have a more, as you see, your parents were physicians. They chose suicide because they knew what was coming. Physicians, we deal with this every day. We know what the right thing to do here is, and it's not a slippery slope. I say the kibosh on all the people that claim it's some sort of slippery slope, or when do you say it's going to be motivated by money? Professionals do their damn job. Palliative care is something we need to really embrace these days. Not everything can be cured, and we can get death with dignity if we really know what we're doing.